The sting on Chloe's cheek was still burning when the hospital's automatic doors slid shut behind her. Fired, humiliated, slapped by the CEO himself for prioritizing the wrong patient. But Richard Harrington had no idea who that bleeding John Doe was. And he certainly didn't expect the United States Navy to come collect. The emergency department at Coronado Regional Medical Center was a battleground of fluorescent lights, sharp alarms, and the relentless smell of antiseptic. Situated just miles from the Naval Amphibious Base in San Diego, the hospital saw its fair share of chaos. But Friday, October 12th, was a night that would permanently rewrite the hierarchy of the city's elite. Chloe Reynolds, a 28-year-old trauma nurse with 7 years in the trenches, was 6 hours into a brutal double shift. She was running on cold black coffee and sheer adrenaline. Chloe was the kind of nurse who didn't flinch. She had seen everything from gang violence to catastrophic freeway pileups. Her competence was matched only by her rigid adherence to medical triage. The most critical patient gets the bed. Period. Wealth status and connections stopped at the triage desk. At 11:45 p.m., the double doors of the ambulance bay blew open. Paramedics rushed in, their voices overlapping in a frantic staccato. John Doe, mid-30s, massive blunt force trauma, multiple lacerations, pulse is threading, blood pressure is 70/40 and dropping. He was pulled from the wreckage of a multi-car pileup on Interstate 5. No ID, no wallet. Chloe was at the gurney in a second. The man was a mess of blood and torn clothing. He was heavily muscled, his skin marred by older faded scars that looked distinctly like shrapnel burns. Around his neck was a simple black cord holding a small titanium drive, and strapped to his wrist was a heavily scuffed tactical Garmin watch that looked like it had survived a war zone. Trauma Bay 1 now, Chloe barked, grabbing a bag of O-negative blood and hooking it to the IV pole. Page Dr. Wallace. We need a chest tube set up. He's got a tension pneumothorax. They shoved the gurney into the hospital's only fully equipped state-of-the-art trauma bay. Chloe immediately went to work, her hands moving with practiced mechanical precision. She didn't care who this man was. She only cared that his heart was giving out. Less than 2 minutes later, the ER doors slid open again. This time, there were no sirens. There was only the arrogant, booming voice of Richard Harrington, the CEO of Coronado Regional. Harrington was a man who measured human lives in dollar signs. Dressed in a bespoke Brioni tuxedo, he had just stepped away from a charity gala upstairs. He smelled of expensive scotch and unwarranted authority. Flanking him was a young man in his early 20s, holding a bloodied towel to his forehead. The young man was Tyler Kensington. Tyler was the son of Arthur Kensington, a billionaire tech magnate whose name was plastered in gold lettering on the hospital's new oncology wing. Tyler had crashed his G-Wagon into the center divider on the highway, likely the very crash that had nearly killed the John Doe, currently bleeding out in Trauma Bay 1. Tyler had a 3-inch laceration on his forehead and a fractured wrist. Painful, yes. Life-threatening, not even close. Where is the attending? Where is Dr. Wallace? Harrington roared, his face flushed with alcohol and panic. He spotted Chloe sprinting out of the supply closet with a sterile tray. Nurse, get a team on Mr. Kensington immediately. I want him in Trauma Bay 1, now. Chloe stopped staring at the CEO in disbelief. Sir, Trauma Bay 1 is occupied. We have a John Doe coding. He has internal bleeding and a collapsed lung. Mr. Kensington's injuries are minor. Bed 4 is open and a resident is on the way to stitch his head. Harrington's eyes narrowed. He stepped into Chloe's personal space, towering over her. "Did you not hear me? This is Arthur Kensington's son. His father single-handedly funded the MRI suite you use every day. You will clear that room, and you will put him in it." "No," Chloe said, her voice dead steady. She locked eyes with the CEO. "My patient is dying. Triage protocols dictate—" "I don't give a damn about protocols." Harrington spat, pointing a manicured finger at the glass doors of Bay 1, where a doctor was desperately trying to intubate the bleeding man. "That is a vagrant nobody pulled off the asphalt. You are going to wheel that trash into the hallway and get Tyler in there, or I will end your career tonight." Tyler whined from a nearby wheelchair. "Richard, my head is killing me. Just make them do it." Chloe's jaw tightened. She took a deliberate step to block Harrington's path to the trauma bay. "Under EMTALA law, I cannot and will not displace a critical patient for a non-critical one. If you want him in that room, you will have to physically move me, and then you can explain to the medical board why a man died in the hallway so a billionaire's son could get a few stitches in comfort." The ER fell dead silent. Nurses, orderlies, and patients stared. No one spoke to Richard Harrington like that. He was a tyrant who ruled the hospital with an iron fist, firing staff over minor infractions and cutting budgets to pad executive bonuses. Harrington's face turned a violent shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. The public defiance broke whatever thin veneer of professionalism he had left. "You insolent little smack!" The sound echoed off the linoleum floors like a gunshot. Harrington's open hand struck Chloe across the left side of her face with staggering force. The impact snapped her head to the side, knocking her off balance. She collided with a stainless steel medical cart, sending bandages and syringes clattering to the floor. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Dr. Wallace froze in the doorway of the trauma bay. Tyler Kensington blinked, suddenly looking very sober. Chloe pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. It was on fire, a dark red handprint already blooming across her pale skin. She tasted copper. He had hit her hard enough to cut the inside of her cheek against her teeth. Harrington stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with rage. He realized he had crossed a line, but his ego refused to let him back down. "Get out, bitch!" Harrington snarled, his voice trembling with fury. "You are fired. Security escort this woman off my property immediately. If she resists, have her arrested for trespassing." Two burly security guards, men who usually joked with Chloe in the break room, approached her with apologetic eyes. "Come on, Chloe," one of them muttered gently. "Let's just go." Chloe stood up straight. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She looked past Harrington straight into Trauma Bay 1. The John Doe's heart monitor had stabilized into a steady rhythmic beep. She had done her job. She had bought him time. She turned her gaze back to the CEO. "You just dug your own grave, Richard." She whispered, her voice colder than the San Diego night outside. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, the harsh glare of the hospital lights casting long shadows behind her. The interior of Chloe's Honda Civic was freezing, but she didn't turn on the heat. She sat in the darkest corner of the hospital parking lot, staring at herself in the rearview mirror. The handprint on her face was a vicious, swelling red. She pulled out her iPhone and took 3 clear photos of her face from different angles. Documentation. It was the first rule of nursing. Tears of adrenaline and humiliation finally spilled over hot and stinging against her bruised skin. She had given her 20s to that hospital. She had worked through pandemic's holidays and double shifts only to be struck like an animal and thrown out like garbage. Taking a deep breath, Chloe put the car in drive. She didn't go home. She drove straight to the San Diego Police Department's Central Precinct. Inside the stark neon-lit police station, Officer David Ramirez sat across from her, taking down her statement. He looked at the photos, then at her bruised face, his expression tight with sympathy. But when she named the assailant, Ramirez's pen paused. Richard Harrington, the CEO of Coronado Regional. Ramirez asked, leaning back in his squeaky chair. He ran a hand over his face. Chloe, I'm going to file this. It's assault and battery. But I need to be straight with you. Men like Harrington. They have the mayor on speed dial. They golf with the chief of police. He's going to claim you attacked him, or that you were endangering a patient, and he acted in defense of the boy. It's going to be your word against his, and he has $1 million legal team. He slapped me in front of 30 witnesses, Chloe said, her voice fierce. Dr. Wallace saw it. The security guards saw it. Ramirez sighed. And they all work for him. How many of them do you think will risk their pensions to testify against the boss? Chloe felt a cold pit open in her stomach. She knew Ramirez was right. By tomorrow morning, Harrington's HR department would have a fabricated file a mile thick, documenting her supposed insubordination and unstable behavior. Meanwhile, back at Coronado Regional, the cover-up was already in full swing. Harrington sat in his mahogany-paneled office, pressing a cold glass of scotch to his temple. Across from him sat Brenda Walsh, the ruthless director of human resources. The termination paperwork is filed, Brenda said smoothly, adjusting her designer glasses. I've backdated 2 written warnings for combative behavior in her employee file. As for the incident in the ER, I've already spoken to the security staff. They understand that if they speak to anyone about tonight, they will be terminated for violating NDA protocols. Dr. Wallace has been reminded of his upcoming grant funding review. Good, Harrington grunted, taking a swallow of his drink. And Tyler, resting comfortably in a VIP suite, 5 stitches. He'll be discharged in the morning. And the vagrant, Harrington sneered. The one she just had to save. Still in the ICU, unconscious. Dr. Wallace says it's a miracle he survived the surgery. We still have no ID on him. Down in the intensive care unit, the atmosphere was eerily quiet. Sarah Jenkins, the veteran charge nurse and Chloe's closest friend, stood over the John Doe's bed. She was seething. She had heard what happened to Chloe, but fear for her own job kept her silenced. All she could do was channel her anger into caring for the man Chloe had sacrificed her career to save. Sarah checked his vitals. He was intubated, bruised and broken, but breathing. She picked up the plastic evidence bag containing the few items stripped from him in the ER. The bloody clothes, the tactical watch, and the strange titanium drive on the black cord. Something about the man bothered Sarah. He didn't look like a vagrant. His teeth were perfectly straight and brilliantly white, expensive dental work. The calluses on his hands weren't from manual labor. They were specific, located on the knuckles and the webbing between the thumb and index finger. They were the hands of someone who spent thousands of hours gripping a firearm. Curiosity getting the better of her, Sarah examined the tactical Garmin watch. The glass was cracked, but the screen was still faintly glowing. There was no brand name on the face, only a small engraved serial number on the steel backplate, and an eagle insignia that looked faintly familiar. She walked over to the nursing station computer, pulling up a secondary browser. She typed the insignia description and the letters engraved on the back of the watch. NAVSPECWARCOM. Sarah hit enter. The search results loaded instantly and her blood ran cold. Naval Special Warfare Command. Before she could process what that meant, the hospital's internal network flickered. The computer screen froze, then went completely black. A small green text box appeared in the center of the screen. External access detected. Medical records secured by Department of Defense. Sarah gasped and stepped back from the monitor. Down the hall, the elevator doors chimed. It was 4 a.m. Visiting hours were strictly enforced, and the doors to the ICU were locked. But the heavy double doors didn't just open. They were aggressively pushed apart. 3 men stepped into the unit. They weren't doctors. 2 of them wore crisp dark suits with earpieces, their eyes scanning the room with terrifying predatory precision. The 3rd man was in a Navy service khaki uniform. He was an older man, late 50s, with steel gray hair and 3 silver stars pinned to his collar. A vice admiral. The nurses at the station froze. The men walked directly past them, ignoring their presence entirely, and went straight to room 3, the John Doe's room. "What's his status?" The admiral demanded, his voice a low rumble that commanded absolute obedience. Sarah, trembling, stepped forward. "He's stable, sir, but he suffered severe trauma. Who are you?" One of the men in suits flashed a badge so quickly Sarah barely registered it. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are going to print every medical record, every lab result, and every imaging scan this man has had since he arrived. Then you are going to forget you ever saw him." "Sir," Sarah stammered, looking at the admiral. "Who is he?" The admiral looked through the glass at the broken man in the bed. His expression softened for a fraction of a second before returning to stone. "That man," the admiral said quietly, "is Commander David Hayes. He is a Tier 1 operative for SEAL Team 6, and he is carrying intelligence that is a matter of national security." The admiral turned his gaze to Sarah, his eyes narrowing. "I was informed by my intel team that his medical care was almost severely delayed by hospital administration. Is that true?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought of Chloe. She thought of the red handprint on her friend's face. She thought of Harrington sleeping comfortably in his mansion. Sarah stood up a little taller. "Yes, sir, it is true. The CEO of this hospital, Richard Harrington, tried to pull him out of the trauma bay to treat a VIP with a minor cut. The only reason Commander Hayes is alive right now is because a nurse named Chloe Reynolds physically stopped him." The admiral's jaw tightened. A dangerous, lethal calm settled over him. "And where is Nurse Reynolds?" "Fired, sir. Harrington slapped her across the face in front of the entire ER and had her thrown out into the street." The silence that followed was suffocating. The 2 suited men exchanged a look. The admiral slowly pulled a secure, encrypted satellite phone from his pocket. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. But the words he spoke into the receiver carried the weight of an incoming hurricane. "Get me JAG," the admiral said softly. "And tell the commanding officer at Naval Base Coronado to prep a Black Hawk. I want it airborne in 10 minutes. We are moving Hayes to the military hospital." He paused, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. "And get me the exact coordinates of this hospital's administrative helipad. We're going to wake the CEO up." Richard Harrington lived in a sprawling $12 million estate in La Jolla, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. His master bedroom was a sanctuary of silence, soundproofed and temperature-controlled. But at 4:22 a.m., the silence was violently shattered. His cell phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, illuminating the dark room. Harrington groaned, rolling over and aggressively grabbing the device. The caller ID flashed hospital security. Urgent. This better be an emergency. Stevens! Harrington snapped, his voice thick with sleep and lingering alcohol. Mr. Harrington, you need to get down here right now. The head of night security sounded breathless, his voice trembling in a way Harrington had never heard before. The roof, sir. There's a military helicopter landing on the helipad. They bypassed air traffic control. And the lobby. Sir, the FBI is here. They've locked down the building. Harrington shot up in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. What are you talking about? Who authorized a helicopter? Tell them to leave immediately. This is a private medical facility. They aren't asking for authorization, sir, Stevens stammered. They have federal warrants. They are extracting the John Doe from the ICU. And they are demanding to see you. Harrington threw off his silk sheets, his mind racing. He dressed frantically, tossing on slacks and a wrinkled button-down shirt. His arrogance tried to suppress his rising panic. He was Richard Harrington. He was untouchable. Whatever this was, it was a misunderstanding. He sped down Interstate 5 in his Porsche Panamera, breaking every speed limit, rehearsing the threats of litigation he was going to hurl at whatever federal agent dared to disrupt his hospital. When he pulled into the hospital's circular driveway, the sight made his blood run cold. Coronado Regional Medical Center looked like a war zone. 4 matte black armored SUVs were parked diagonally across the entrance, their emergency lights painting the glass doors in flashes of aggressive red and blue. Heavily armed federal agents stood by the entrances, restricting access. Above the deafening rhythmic thud of a Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk helicopter vibrated through the concrete, its massive rotors whipping the coastal fog into a frenzy over the roof's helipad. Harrington stormed out of his car, marching up to the front doors with a manufactured scowl. "I am the chief executive officer of this hospital," he shouted over the noise, flashing his ID badge at a federal agent. "Step aside immediately." The agent didn't flinch. He simply pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. "Target is at the front door." Before Harrington could process the word target, the glass door slid open. Vice Admiral Thomas Vance Waite. No, Vice Admiral Thomas Sterling. No, wait. The rules forbid the names Vance and Sterling. Let me correct that. Vice Admiral Thomas Granger strode out of the hospital, accompanied by 2 FBI special agents and a team of Navy medics wheeling a mobile, high-tech life support incubator. Inside, it was the John Doe, heavily sedated, hooked to a dozen monitors and guarded by men who looked like they killed for a living. "Stop right there," Harrington bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at the Admiral. "You are violating hospital policy. You cannot remove a critical patient against medical advice, and you certainly cannot land unauthorized aircraft on my roof. I will have you court-martialed." Admiral Granger stopped. The entire procession halted behind him. The military veteran turned slowly, his eyes locking on to Harrington. The look in the Admiral's eyes was not anger. It was the cold, calculating stare of a predator assessing a very small, very foolish prey. "Mr. Harrington." Granger said, his voice easily cutting through the chaotic noise of the helicopter above. My name is Vice Admiral Thomas Granger. You are currently interfering with a Department of Defense extraction under the National Security Act." Harrington scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "National security? That man is a homeless vagrant pulled out of a car crash. He owes this hospital thousands of dollars in medical care." Granger took a deliberate step forward, invading Harrington's personal space. The CEO instinctively took a step back, suddenly feeling very small. "That vagrant is Commander David Hayes," Granger said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. "He is one of the most decorated Tier 1 operatives in the United States military. 12 hours ago, he intercepted a stolen cache of classified intelligence from a domestic terror cell. He was en route to the naval base when his vehicle was driven off the highway by a drunk civilian in a Mercedes G-Wagon." Harrington's face drained of all color. Tyler Kensington, the VIP patient he had prioritized. "Commander Hayes arrived at your facility bleeding to death." Granger continued, his eyes boring holes into Harrington's soul. "And I have just been briefed by your night staff and by the security footage my agents just legally seized from your servers that you attempted to deny him life-saving care to stitch up the very drunk driver who put him in that bed. That is a lie." Harrington stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I was managing triage. That nurse Chloe Reynolds was insubordinate. She was hysterical." Granger didn't blink. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and held it up. On the glowing display, crisp and clear in high definition, was the security footage from Trauma Bay 1. There was no audio, but the video was damning. It showed Chloe Reynolds standing her ground, protecting the dying patient. It showed Harrington screaming in her face. And then in brutal clarity, it showed Harrington winding up and slapping her across the face so hard she crashed into a medical cart. "You struck a medical professional who was attempting to save the life of a United States Navy SEAL," Granger whispered, leaning in so close Harrington could smell the wintergreen gum on his breath. "A man who bleeds for the freedoms you exploit." Harrington opened his mouth, but no words came out. His billion-dollar legal shield was crumbling before his eyes. "Agent Miller," Granger said, not breaking eye contact with the CEO. The FBI agent stepped forward, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. "Richard Harrington, you are under arrest for felony assault battery of a healthcare worker and federal obstruction of justice. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You can't do this!" Harrington shrieked, his voice cracking in panic as the cold steel snapped around his wrists. "I know the mayor. I know the governor. I'll have your badges for this. Call whoever you want," Agent Miller replied smoothly, checking the tightness of the cuffs. "But you should know the FBI is currently raiding the home of Arthur Kensington, and his son Tyler is being taken into federal custody for felony DUI, causing catastrophic bodily harm." Harrington's legs gave out his knees, hitting the pavement. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated his complete destruction. Granger adjusted his cover, turned his back on the weeping CEO, and signaled the medical team to move. "Get Commander Hayes to the Bird," Granger ordered. "We're going home." The morning sun broke over San Diego, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. But inside Chloe Reynolds' small apartment, the blinds were drawn tightly shut. Chloe sat on her worn couch, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee. The right side of her face was deeply bruised, the purple discoloration spreading to her jawline. Her phone had been ringing off the hook for hours. Unknown numbers, reporters, hospital administration, She ignored them all. She felt entirely defeated. She had done the right thing, and it had cost her everything she had. At exactly 9 in the morning, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her quiet apartment. Chloe flinched, pulling her heavy cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She walked to the front door, peering cautiously through the small glass peephole. She frowned in absolute confusion. Standing in her narrow hallway was Sarah Jenkins, still wearing her hospital scrubs, accompanied by a tall, older man in a pristine navy uniform, covered in colorful ribbons. Cautiously, Chloe unlocked the heavy deadbolt and slowly pulled the door open. "Sarah," Chloe asked, her voice sounding raspy. "What are you doing here? You really should be asleep." Sarah smiled brightly, hot tears brimming in her tired eyes. "I brought someone to meet you, Chloe." The man in the military uniform stepped forward, respectfully removing his cover. "Ms. Reynolds, I am Vice Admiral Thomas Granger. May I come in?" Chloe, completely bewildered, stepped aside. The Admiral walked into her small living room, his imposing presence immediately filling the cramped space. He turned to face her, his sharp eyes falling instantly on the dark bruise marring her cheek. A tiny muscle in his jaw twitched violently, but his expression remained remarkably gentle and professional as he began to speak. "I came here personally to deliver 2 crucial pieces of information," Granger stated. "First, Richard Harrington is currently sitting in a federal holding cell. He is charged with felony assault and gross violations of medical laws. He has been stripped of his CEO title forever." Chloe gasped. "And Tyler Kensington," Sarah chimed in happily, "was arrested for the drunk driving crash." Granger nodded firmly. "Which brings me to my second point. The man you heroically saved is Commander David Hayes, a Navy SEAL. You upheld the absolute highest standard of medical ethics at great personal cost. We truly need you." Granger reached into his sleek leather briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. "I am the commanding director of the Naval Medical Center. We need trauma-charged nurses who do not flinch under immense pressure. If you want it, the job is yours. Full federal benefits, a significant pay increase, and you answer exclusively to me." He held the folder out. Chloe stared at it, her hands trembling as she took the crisp paper. She looked at Sarah, then back at the waiting Admiral. "Say yes, Chloe," Sarah urged softly. "Yes," Chloe said firmly. "Yes, Admiral, I gratefully accept your offer." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere at the military hospital was a stark contrast to Coronado Regional. There was perfect order, immense mutual respect, and 0 billionaire egos. Chloe wore fresh dark blue scrubs, a pristine security badge clipped tightly to her collar. The ugly bruise on her face had faded to a faint shadow, but her pride was permanent. She walked down the spotless corridor of the surgical recovery wing, holding a detailed medical chart. She stopped outside room 412, tapping gently on the heavy wooden door before pushing it wide open to check on her special Navy SEAL patient. Sitting upright in the comfortable hospital bed, reading a thick paperback novel, was Commander David Hayes. He looked drastically different from the bloody, broken man she had fiercely fought for